These are disturbing stories to listen to before you go to sleep. Story 1.
When I moved into my new apartment in downtown Portland, I thought I was hitting the jackpot. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect, and the unit was fully furnished. My only requirement was a roommate, and the landlord mentioned he already had someone living there. His name was Ethan. He described him as quiet, respectful, keeps to himself. That sounded ideal to me. The first time I met Ethan, I immediately noticed his calm demeanor. He was tall, pale, with deep-set eyes that seemed to flicker with some hidden thought. He smiled politely, shook my hand, and then retreated to his room, leaving me to settle in. At first, everything seemed normal. Ethan barely spoke unless necessary, but occasionally he would ask questions about my habits, what I ate, what I watched, even the type of music I liked. It felt oddly personal, but I chalked it up to curiosity. Things started to feel off about 2 weeks in. I would come home from work late, only to notice his door wide open with faint candlelight spilling into the hallway. When I asked, he said he was meditating. That night, I caught a whiff of burning incense that smelled like sulfur, mixed with something metallic I couldn't identify. I brushed it off. Maybe he had some weird spiritual practice. Then the dream started. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, seeing shadows crawling across my ceiling, hearing whispers in the language I didn't understand. They always mentioned my name. At first, I thought it was stress, but the sense of being watched didn't fade during the day. One evening, I returned from work earlier than usual and found Ethan kneeling in the middle of the living room. The floor was covered with candles forming a pentagram. At the center was a small, black statuette of a figure I didn't recognize. He was chanting, his voice low but hypnotic. I froze, unsure if I should run or confront him. He looked up, and his eyes, cold, unblinking, locked with mine. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "You'll understand soon." I backed into my room, heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I decided I needed to know more about him. I started researching, carefully checking his online presence. Social media accounts were minimal, but there were obscure forums where he posted under a pseudonym, The Oracle. The posts were about rituals, summoning, and controlling human minds. I realized with a chill that my roommate wasn't just eccentric. He was part of something dangerous, something cultish. The breaking point came one rainy Thursday. I had a friend over, Lena, my coworker. She joked about how eerie the apartment felt. Just as we were talking, Ethan came out of his room, smiling calmly. "You invited her," he said. His voice had an edge, a subtle threat I couldn't ignore. He led us into the living room, where the pentagram was now larger, with fresh symbols etched into the floorboards. Candles burned in a precise pattern. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "You two are here for a reason," he said. His voice was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. "You will see the truth, the path beyond this world." Lena and I backed away, but Ethan didn't move. He raised his hands, and the candles flickered violently as a low, vibrating hum filled the room. My stomach churned, and I felt my limbs lock as if some invisible force was holding me. I broke free of the paralysis and bolted toward the door, grabbing Lena. We ran down the hallway, drenched in rain, hearts racing. I called the police, but when they arrived, the apartment was empty. The pentagram, the candles gone. Only a faint scent of sulfur lingered in the air. Over the next few weeks, I tried to piece together what had happened. I discovered from neighbors that Ethan had moved in months before I arrived, and none of the previous tenants had stayed long. Some even mentioned seeing strange groups enter the apartment late at night, chanting in languages that made their skin crawl. I don't know if he ever returned, or if the cult is still active. I moved out as soon as I could, but the paranoia hasn't left me. Every time I hear soft chanting or smell incense, my mind drifts back to that pentagram, that room, and the man who smiled while planning horrors I can barely imagine. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Ethan is still out there, recruiting, plotting, and waiting for the right person, in the right apartment, to continue his dark work, and I hope that person is not me.
My name is Alex, and this happened in October of 2023. I don't expect everyone to believe me, but I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. And whatever was out there that night was not an animal. There were 5 of us on that trip. Me, Alex, Marcus, Jenna, Luis, and Tyler. We had planned a weekend camping trip about 2 hours outside of town, somewhere past a small wooded area near an old hiking trail that Marcus said his uncle used to go to all the time. According to him, it was quiet, not many people, and perfect for camping. We got there around 5 p.m., just as the sun was starting to set. The place already felt off. The woods were too quiet. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just wind moving through the trees. Jenna noticed it first. She asked why it was so quiet. Luis joked that maybe we scared everything away, but he said it in that half-joking way where you could tell he was a little uneasy too. We set up camp anyway. 2 tents, a small fire, and our chairs around it. As it got darker, the forest felt like it was closing in around us. You know that feeling when it's night and the trees just look like tall shadows? Felt like that, but worse, like we were being watched. Around 9 p.m., we started hearing noises. At first, it sounded like footsteps far away. Leaves crunching, slow, like someone walking in a circle around our camp. Marcus stood up and shined his flashlight into the trees and called out hello, asking if someone was out there. No response, just silence again. We all kind of laughed it off, but nobody was really laughing. About 30 minutes later, Tyler asked if we heard that. We all stopped talking. From somewhere deep in the woods, we heard a voice. Said Marcus. Every single one of us turned and looked at Marcus. Jenna asked if that was him. Marcus slowly shook his head and said no. Then we heard it again from the same direction, saying, "Marcus, come here." It sounded like Marcus, not exactly, but close enough that if you would think it was him calling from far away. Luis stood up and said, "Okay, that's not funny," and asked which one of us was messing around. But nobody answered because we were all right there by the fire. Then the voice said something that made my stomach drop. Said Alex. It was my name, and it sounded like my mom's voice, clear as day, from the woods 2 hours away from home. The voice said, "Alex, come here again," soft and slow. I felt frozen. There was no way. Jenna grabbed my arm and whispered to not go out there. The footsteps started again, circling us, but we still couldn't see anything. Marcus and Tyler both had flashlights out now, shining them into the trees, but the light didn't go very far between the trunks. Then Luis said quietly that he saw something. We all turned. About maybe 30 or 40 feet away between 2 trees, there was something standing there. At first I thought it was a deer because of how tall and skinny it looked, but then it stepped forward into the light a little. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. Too tall. Its arms were too long, hanging almost to its knees. Its head looked like some kind of animal skull, and its eyes reflected the flashlight like an animal's would. But it was standing on 2 legs. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then it tilted its head to the side, and in Jenna's voice said, "Alex, don't you recognize me?" Jenna was standing right next to me, still holding my arm so tight it hurt. Tyler whispered, asking what that was. The thing took 1 slow step toward us, and the way it moved wasn't like a normal person walking. It was jerky, like it didn't quite know how legs worked. Marcus suddenly yelled to get in the car right now. That snapped us out of it. We all started moving at the same time, grabbing keys, phones, anything important. The thing started walking faster toward us, still not running, just walking, but it was covering ground way too fast. Then it started making noises in different voices, one after another, saying Marcus, then Luis, then Jenna, then in my mom's voice again saying, "Alex, wait." I didn't look back, and none of us did. We jumped into Marcus's truck, and as he started the engine, Tyler, who was in the back seat, looked out the rear window and started yelling to go. Marcus floored it down the dirt path, and I finally looked back. The thing was standing at the edge of the trees just watching us leave, but its head was turned too far, like almost completely backwards, still looking at the truck as we drove away. We didn't talk for a solid 20 minutes, we just drove. Finally, Luis said we were never coming back there. Marcus nodded and said his uncle told him once there were things in those woods that mimic people, and that if you ever hear your name out there, no, you didn't. I asked him why he didn't tell us that before we came, and he said because he didn't think it was real. I don't go camping anymore. Not in deep woods, not anywhere far from people. And sometimes late at night when I'm half asleep, I swear I hear a voice outside my window softly saying my name, but I never look, because if that thing learned my voice, I don't want to know what else it learned.
My name is Daniel, and I've never told this story publicly before. Not because I think people won't believe me, but because part of me is still trying to convince myself it didn't happen. But there are things you can't explain away, no matter how hard you try. And what happened that winter night still follows me, even now. It started when I moved into a small house just outside a quiet town in northern Arizona. The place was cheap, way cheaper than anything else in the area, which should have been my first red flag. But I was 19, broke, and desperate to get out on my own. The landlord, a quiet older man named Mr. Halvorson, barely said anything during the tour. He just handed me the keys and told me, "If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer it." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of weird joke. He didn't laugh back. The first few days were normal. The house was old but livable. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a narrow hallway that always felt colder than the rest of the house. I noticed right away that the previous tenant had left in a hurry. There were scratches on the inside of the front door, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Deep ones. At night, the house made noises, creaks, tapping, pipes shifting, but that's normal, right? Old houses do that. I kept telling myself that. Until the 4th night. I woke up around 2:13 a.m. to the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive. Just deliberate. I froze in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. Then it came again. Knock. 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 My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone and checked the time again. 2:13, I remembered what the landlord said, but curiosity got the better of me. I got up slowly and walked toward the front door. The hallway felt colder than usual, like stepping into a freezer. The closer I got, the louder the knocking felt, even though it hadn't changed. I reached the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. I waited a few seconds. Then turned away, telling myself it was probably just someone messing around. That's when I heard it. From behind me. "Daniel," it was a whisper. Right in my ear. I spun around, but there was no one there. My entire body went cold. I went back to my room and locked the door. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked outside. No footprints. No signs anyone had been there. I almost convinced myself it was a dream. Almost. The next night, it happened again. 2:13 a.m. 3 knocks. This time, I didn't move. I stayed in bed, staring at the door. Then the whisper came again. "Daniel, let me in." It sounded like my voice. Exactly like me. Same tone. Same pitch. Same everything. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house. From the hallway. I didn't leave my room that night either. Things got worse after that. Doors would open on their own. Lights would flicker. I started hearing footsteps in the hallway when I was alone. Slow, dragging steps, like someone walking barefoot on old wood. I set up my phone one night to record while I slept. The next morning, I checked the footage. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Just me sleeping. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the door to my room slowly creaked open. My stomach dropped as I watched it. I hadn't opened it. I always locked it. The camera angle didn't show the hallway, just the doorway. But something stepped into frame. At first, I thought it was me. It looked like me. Same height. Same build. Same face. But something was wrong. Its eyes were completely black. And it was smiling. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too stretched. Like it didn't understand how human faces were supposed to work. It walked over to my bed and just stood there, staring down at me while I slept. 4 hours. Not moving. Not blinking. Just watching. At one point, it leaned down close to my ear. The audio picked up a whisper. Almost ready. I slammed my phone down. And nearly threw up. I packed a bag that morning and planned to leave, but something stopped me. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I was in denial. That night, I stayed up, sitting in the corner of my room with the lights on. I watched the clock. 2:12, 2:13. The knocking started immediately. Louder this time. More urgent. Daniel, open the door. My voice. Again. But this time, it sounded angry. I shouted back, telling it to go away. The knocking stopped. For a second, everything went completely silent. Then I heard footsteps. Not in the hallway. Inside my room. Behind me. I turned slowly, and my heart stopped. It was standing there. The same thing from the video. Looking exactly like me, but wrong in every possible way. Its head tilted slightly, and it smiled that same unnatural smile. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," it said. I couldn't move. My body felt locked in place. It took a step closer. "This house needs someone," it continued. "And you fit perfectly." I finally found the strength to move and bolted for the door. I threw it open and ran down the hallway. As I passed the front door, I heard knocking again, from the outside this time. 3 slow knocks. I didn't stop. I ran out of the house and didn't look back. I slept in my car that night and left town the next morning. I never went back for the rest of my things. Weeks later, I looked up the property online. I found out 3 different people had lived there in the past 5 years. All of them disappeared. No explanation. No bodies. Nothing. Sometimes, I still wake up at 2:13 a.m. And every once in a while, I hear it. 3 slow knocks. And my own voice, from somewhere just outside my door, whispering, "Daniel. I'm still here."
My name is Maya, and I stopped trusting mirrors the night I realized mine was looking back at me. This happened last summer, a few weeks after I moved into a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building in a quiet part of town. It wasn't anything special, just cheap rent and close to my job, but there was something about the place that felt off. The hallway lights flickered constantly, the neighbors kept to themselves, and the building always seemed too quiet, even during the day. My landlord, a woman named Mrs. Klein, was overly friendly but avoided eye contact whenever I asked about the building's history. The only strange thing she said when handing me the keys was, "If anything in your apartment seems out of place, don't ignore it." I thought she was just being dramatic. I wish she was. The first few days were normal. I unpacked, decorated, and tried to settle in. My bedroom had a large mirror on the wall, the kind that stretches from waist height almost to the ceiling. I didn't think much of it at first. It was useful when getting ready for work. But on the 4th night, something changed. I woke up around 3 a.m., feeling like someone was watching me. My room was dark except for the faint glow of streetlights coming through the window. I looked toward the mirror, and for a second, I thought I saw movement. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at my reflection. Everything looked normal. Same bed, same room, same me. I told myself it was just my eyes adjusting to the dark. Then I noticed something small. In the reflection, my closet door was slightly open. In reality, it was closed. I froze. I slowly turned my head toward the closet. Still closed. When I looked back at the mirror, it was open again. Just a crack. I got up, my legs shaking, and walked over to the closet. I opened it. Nothing inside but clothes. No movement. No sound. I shut it and went back to bed, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. The next night, it happened again. This time, I stayed in bed and just watched the mirror. At exactly 3 a.m., the closet door in the reflection slowly creaked open. Not in real life. Only in the mirror. I couldn't breathe. I stared at it as it opened wider and wider until it was fully open. The inside of the closet in the reflection looked darker than it should have been, like the light from my room wasn't reaching it. And then something moved inside. A shape. Tall. Thin. Standing in the reflection of my closet. I turned quickly to look at the real closet. Empty. When I looked back at the mirror, it was gone. The door was closed again. I didn't sleep that night. Things got worse after that. I started noticing small differences between my room and the reflection. Objects would be slightly out of place. My phone would be on the nightstand in real life, but on the floor in the mirror. My chair would face one direction, but in the reflection, it faced another. It was subtle, but it was wrong. And every night at 3 a.m., something in the mirror would change. One night, I saw myself standing in the reflection. Not lying in bed like I actually was, but standing near the door, just staring at me. My reflection smiled slowly. I didn't. I remember whispering, "That's not me." The reflection tilted its head, still smiling. Then it raised its hand and tapped on the inside of the mirror. 3 slow taps. I jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. The reflection snapped back to normal. I was alone again. Or at least, it looked like I was. I started covering the mirror with a blanket before going to sleep, but that didn't help. I could still hear things at night. Soft tapping sounds. Scratching. And sometimes, breathing. Like someone was right on the other side of the glass. One night, I woke up to the sound of fabric moving. The blanket had fallen off the mirror. I didn't remember touching it. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dark, and I saw the mirror clearly again. This time, my reflection wasn't there. The room in. The mirror was empty. My bed was there, but it was empty. I was sitting in it, but in the reflection, I was gone. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Then, from the hallway behind me, in the reflection, I saw something walk into my room. It looked exactly like me. Same hair, same clothes, same face. But its eyes were wrong. Too dark. Too empty. It walked slowly toward the mirror, staring directly at me, not at my reflection, but at me. Then it smiled. "You've been watching me for a while," it said. Its voice sounded like mine, but distorted, like it was coming through water. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It stepped closer until it was right up against the inside of the mirror. Then it raised its hand and pressed it against the glass. I felt something cold press against my own hand. I hadn't moved it, but it was touching the mirror. Touching it. "It's easier if you stop fighting," it whispered. "We can switch." That was the moment I snapped out of it. I yanked my hand back and ran out of the room, grabbing my keys and phone. I didn't even put shoes on. I ran down the hallway, out of the building, and didn't stop until I was across the street. I stayed at a friend's house that night. The next day, I went back with her to grab my things. The mirror was still there. Covered. Exactly how I left it. I refused to uncover it. I moved out that same day. I thought it was over. But a week later, I got a message from my old landlord. She said a new tenant had moved in. Then she sent a picture of the room. The mirror was uncovered. And in the reflection, standing behind the new girl, was me. Smiling. Watching. Waiting.
My name is Kayla, and if you're listening to this because you think your ex is just being annoying or trying to get your attention, I need you to understand something. I used to think the same thing. I used to think people were overreacting when they talked about stalkers. I used to think that if things ever got that bad, it would be obvious. It wasn't obvious. Not at first. It started small, the way these things always do. My ex-boyfriend's name was Ryan. We dated for a little over a year, and for most of that time, he was completely normal. Maybe a little clingy, maybe a little jealous, but nothing I thought was dangerous. We broke up because I was moving to a different part of the city for school, and I just didn't feel the same about him anymore. He didn't take it well, but he didn't scream or threaten me or anything like that. He just kept saying, "You'll regret this. You'll see." At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic. For the first week after the breakup, he texted me a lot. Long paragraphs about how much he loved me, how we were meant to be together, how I was making a mistake. I didn't respond. Then the texts turned into short messages. "I saw you today. You looked really pretty in that black hoodie. Who was that guy you were talking to?" That's when I started to feel nervous. Because I had been wearing a black hoodie that day, and I had talked to a guy after class. I asked him how he knew that, and he just replied, "I'm always closer than you think." After that, I blocked his number and all his social media. For a few days, everything was quiet. I thought it was over. Then I started finding things. The first thing was a photo. It was slipped under my apartment door. It was a picture of me walking from my car to my apartment building. The photo had been taken from across the street. On the back, it said, "You should be more careful. Someone could be watching you." I went to the police, but they said unless he directly threatened me, there wasn't much they could do. So I tried to be careful. I started parking in different spots, looking over my shoulder, keeping my curtains closed at night. Then the noises started. I lived on the second floor, and almost every night around 1 or 2 a.m., I would hear a soft tapping on my bedroom window. At first, I told myself it was just a tree branch or something, but there were no trees near my window. One night, the tapping woke me up. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate. I was too scared to look at first, but the tapping kept going. I finally sat up and looked toward the window. There was someone standing on the small roof outside my window. Just a silhouette at first. Then they leaned closer to the glass. It was Ryan. He smiled and raised his hand and waved at me like this was completely normal. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. He mouthed something through the glass. I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. He said, "I miss you." I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. A week later, I came home and found my apartment door unlocked. I was sure I had locked it that morning. I went inside slowly, checking every room. Nothing looked stolen. Nothing looked broken. But on my kitchen table, there was a cup. A cup I didn't own. And inside the cup was a note. "You really should lock your doors." That's when I knew this wasn't just a clingy ex anymore. This was something else. I stayed at my friend Jenna's apartment for a few nights, but I still had to go back to my place for clothes and school. One afternoon, I went back alone. Everything seemed normal at first. Too normal. Then I noticed my bedroom door was closed. I always left it open. I remember slowly walking toward it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pushed the door open. Ryan was sitting on my bed, just sitting there like he lived there. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey," he said, calm as ever. I ran. I didn't even say anything. I ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, and into the parking lot. I heard him calling my name behind me, but I didn't stop. I finally got a restraining order after that, but here's the part that still scares me the most. 2 weeks later, I moved to a new apartment. New building, new locks, new everything. I didn't tell many people the address. Only my parents, my friend Jenna, and the leasing office. The first night I stayed there, I was unpacking boxes when I heard a soft knock on my front door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. I walked quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. I waited a few seconds, then looked down. There was a photo on the floor. A photo of me, standing in my new apartment, unpacking boxes. taken from outside my window. On the back of the photo, it said, "New place." Nice. I'm happier closer now. I don't live alone anymore. And I always check my windows. Every night.